I know many of us here like have a desire for marriage, and it's a really big thing on marriage because I've heard, I've never been married, but I have heard plenty of things from pastors and such about marriage, about difficulties in marriage. John Piper shared about how for like many years having real difficulty in marriage, and he says that marriage is not about always being in love. You will have seasons where it's difficult. You will have seasons where you really don't really love the spouse. But remaining faithful, and how we must come to be in a place where, with Christlikeness, we go more and more from Amnon kind of love, based on my pleasure, based on what I get love, to God's kind of love, the unconditional type. And this is what's ordered for husbands. Ephesians 5:25, after, it says, wives, submit your husband as to the Lord, verse 22, 3, 4. When it comes to husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Now, that's one of the most important passages for husbands. We all know, of course, love your wives, but what does it say there? Husbands, love your wives, just like Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. So then you have to study, how did Christ love the church and give himself for her? Well, I go into two things. The unconditional part. Did Christ love the church when she was in her pristine, beautiful, virgin, wonderful condition? No, like I said, exactly the opposite. Spiritually, we were prostitutes. I'm using that imagery because it's in the Bible plenty of times. Spiritually, we're absolute prostitutes, way out there. No pleasure. But Christ, he loved the church and he gave himself for her. Number two, sacrificial love. So number one, unconditional aspect. Number two, sacrificial aspect. I sacrifice myself. So in marriage, yes, there will be seasons where it's not as pleasant. But even in seasons where it's hard to love her, just like Christ loved me when I was most undeserving, I didn't meet any condition, being able to still love her. Number one. And then number two, sacrificial. It cost me. Was it just easy flippant for Jesus to love the church? No, Paul has in mind, of course, the ultimate love of giving up himself, where it cost him his everything. That's the word for Christian husbands. It costs you. Times where she does not meet my needs or wants, whatever, it doesn't matter. Christ, how did he love the church? Unconditionally, sacrificially. And as I teach, when it comes to husbands and marriage, seasons where she is not lovable, she is not meeting my needs and wants, actually those are the very seasons where you can obey this. Because those are the times where you can show the love of Christ, that kind of love, the unconditional type. Because when she's meeting all the conditions, that's conditional more. That's not unconditional so much. But seasons where it's difficult to love her, those are actually the seasons where you can actually obey this. So that's with the husbands, that type, but generally also as Christians, whether men or women, our fallenness gets us to have the conditional type based on my gain, my needs and wants, what I get, loving. By becoming more and more like Christ, by growing and maturing in Christ, we must come to more and more be able to have this kind of love, the unconditional type.
Thinking about the sacrificial love part, I had run across this case recently, where a husband and wife had got married, and within a couple months after, the wife had gotten really sick with COVID, like long-term complications, that have stretched on for like 3 years, 2 or 3 years, and like bedridden, can't do anything basically, and I've just seen that as, an example of sacrificial love on the husband's part, because she can't do anything to help in the relationship. She's just so completely out of energy and can hardly function by herself, and the husband has to take care of everything. So, not that I mean, that was just an example that I was thinking of as you were talking.
Yeah,
if you don't expect necessarily to be in that situation, you get married, you go on your honeymoon, it's exciting, newlyweds, and then just like bam, out of nowhere.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's the perfect example. As I often go into where Paul Washer, he speaks about how, I've listened to him teaching on marriage a lot. I mean, many, many, many hours about manhood, manhood, womanhood, marriage, things like that, raising children. But as he said, look, if my wife got into a terrible car accident and she is like disfigured or whatever, and she's bedridden, I'm not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, she needs me more now, and I'm going to be right with her. And when you hear things like that, it's so inspiring, and it's just so it has a huge impact, and I'm very, very thankful for men like that. And I know he's not just talking the talk. I know this is real, and this is supposed to be the case with men. But as I went over in our time period, when we were going into influence, we spent a week on like the maturity part a little bit, about manhood, about how boys become adolescent when they're 15 and they remain adolescent until they're 35, or it's more like 60 now. I mean, some people, I've experienced where I'm just, it's amazing. But it used to be where, like, when men get older, like, there's like this respect, and like they're wise and they're mature, and you get to learn from example. But as Paul Washer says, and many others say, it's just so bad. But such examples like that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's it right there. And that so requires the Christlikeness, and may God bless him. Until death do us part. That's the vow, and you keep it, period.